Hey everybody, Mike Shea here, along with Ryan Mendoza. We are here to do the commentary for issue 14. Why don't we go ahead and jump right into it? I am on the East Coast of the United States. It's 9:41 at night. Ryan is in Manila, and it is what time there?
9:41 a.m.
Yeah, so we're exactly on the other side of the world. Um, why don't we talk for a bit about sort of what led us to issue 14? Um, we had way back in issue 3 dealt with Ren and her family's background.
Yep.
And at that time, you are the one who suggested we add the sort of monsters from Philippine mythology, the
Yeah.
Aswang creatures and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And once you said that, I jumped on it. I thought that was a great idea. I thought it was very cool. Something we don't see a lot of here in the United States. And
Yeah.
it made a lot of sense when we had written her to be a Filipino character to go ahead and bring that in, to bring, everything, that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did that, we sort of teased it, but we never really dealt with it. We knew that something was stalking Ren's family, perhaps stalking Ren herself, and it was going to be something that we were going to have to deal with.
Yeah. I
And
think
then
I remember
Mhm.
you were having troubles with what antagonist we were going to have for issue 3. You didn't
Mhm.
really want to reveal that Simon was actually the one doing the stalking.
Right.
So we kind of figured that it would be best if we uh, use a different type of creature that
Mhm.
was, more aligned with Ren's heritage.
Mhm.
And so I guess you gravitated towards the Aswang.
Mhm.
And since most people in the US aren't really aware or familiar with the Philippine mythology, it was a great way to introduce a
Mhm.
creature or character that was um, not very known about
Right.
his characteristics. So we were free to just make the characters assume that it was something else, but
Mhm.
actually it was just Simon.
Right. Right. And we sort of also faked it out with, because that's where we introduced Anton as being the ghost, and that's when
Yeah.
realized that he had been there the whole time as well. So we were kind of, sort of playing the shell game, trying not to show certain things and show other things, and really trying to throw readers off what we were trying to do that first season. But coming out of that, I think we both knew that eventually we were going to have to deal with the Aswang and, Ren's relation to it, Ren's family's relation to it. And
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if we talked about it. One of the ideas that certainly I had was when they went to Innsmouth, there might be like a cargo ship that had been, ripped out from the inside, and maybe the Aswang had traveled over to the United States. And
Yeah.
I can't remember why we decided not to do it there, but I'm glad we did, because it was a much better solution to send her over there rather than to bring it here, I thought.
Well, we were trying to tie it with her third third eye power.
Hmm.
So with the spirits and all.
Hmm.
And of course, I think this was the issue where we actually showed the Aswang, but
Hmm.
only in her uh, visions
Hmm.
when she touched her mom's hand.
Hmm.
So we actually did show the Aswang
Yeah.
in that issue, but we never really implied that it was going to make an appearance. But we
Right.
did talk about it, and I think you did mention it that one of her cousins would be the one, but I think
Hmm.
it just made it difficult
Yeah.
for to imagine that they would cross
Right.
cross the seas just to hunt her down. So we
Right.
had to refine it a bit.
Right. And one of the other things that came out of that Innsmouth story was how good a story we could do with two issues.
Mhm.
Where we really took her there. We could have rushed through it in one issue, but it would have been too much. And
Yeah.
so when we started talking about what we were going to do for the third issue, kicking it off with a two-parter is a fun way to start a season. And you know, penciled in Ren's story for that one real quick and sort of set the scenes to get there at the end of season two. Especially with that last issue where she sees her mom being stalked in
Mhm.
the crystal ball.
Yeah, and it also made the story breathe a little more. So
Hmm.
we have a lot more character
Hmm.
development.
Yeah.
We were also able to expand the lore a bit more, which we try
Hmm.
to do with every issue, even
Hmm.
though just like this one, it doesn't really deal much with the Lovecraftian mythos, but
Right.
it still advances the lore
Hmm.
somehow.
Right.
There's some connections there.
Right. There's absolutely connections there. So I know that this is in my head. I assume that it's in your head or that you have something similar, which is, that there's a connection with all these dark mythologies and strange things that you don't understand. And
Absolutely.
the mythos is the Lovecraftian mythos is one way to see it, but it's not the only way that you could see it or access it. There's all these different ways that you can. And we're
Yeah.
sort of exploring some different ones right now.
And it all, I think we were all able to tie it up with the Dreamlands. So
Hmm.
that's partly a gateway to
Right.
all the mythologies,
Right.
which is kind of inspired in a way by some other mythologies, such
Hmm.
as Christian Judeo, which imagines that the Dreamlands is actually the gateway to a lot of other worlds.
Right. And one of the things that we're doing in this third season is saying that, it's not just the Judeo-Christian viewpoint that works in this, that we're really exploring some of the others as well.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Filipino right now, but also, some of the Hindi myths and some of that is going to be coming up as well. So yeah, one of the things that we talked about a lot, especially early on, was that we weren't only going to focus on Lovecraftian mythos, that we wanted to explore and play with different ideas like, classic pulp science fiction,
Mm.
noir, but also these other kinds of beliefs and mythologies. So where we could bring this stuff in and, we've set up this template where it's open that we could bring in any sort of different thing and play with it in this world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then kind of see it from that point of view
Hmm.
of what this where these creatures or this mythology lie in all of it. It's just like the Lovecraftian mythos is just another aspect of mythology.
Hmm.
It's definitely literature. It's derived from literature, but in a way, it's more mythology right now. It's the
Right.
way that mythology start in the first place, anyway.
Right. Exactly. It's exactly what you're saying, which is mythology tends to come from the unknown, and you
Mm-hmm.
try and find a way to define this unknown thing in a way that makes sense, and that's mythology. And sometimes it is, a god figure or whatever, and sometimes it's a monster that you don't understand. And you know, so yeah, I think you're exactly right there. But anyway, so we knew that this was coming. We knew we wanted to kick off season three with this trip. And so why don't we go ahead and dig into this issue? I want to talk about the cover first off, because I think this is another one of your great ones. Um, I've certainly gotten a lot of feedback from the Kickstarter crew and the social media people that they really like this one. I think
Mm-hmm.
frankly, anytime we put Ren on a cover, people are pretty happy. But especially this one, it's got a beautiful color palette to it, and the Aswang is she looks great. So can you talk about this cover, how you sort of came at it?
All right. Well, we decided that the cover needed to have lots of drama in it, as we usually do. Like before, we decided with this one, among others, because it introduces the creatures. I mean, we already knew about the Aswang, but no, we did not know about this other one right here.
Right.
And since the other characters were not really present here, so it was more appropriate to show the action happening around Simon and Ren. And then we also wanted to see the settings for the story.
Right.
So in a way, it's kind of a good summary of what happens in the first issue. And I mean, it works because it doesn't really tell you much about the story,
right?
But it does entice you with the visuals. I mean, if you're from the West, you'd go like, "What the hell is this thing?"
Right.
It's frightening, but at the same time, it's kind of beautiful in some sense.
Right. So, from a Western point of view, we've been so trained with vampires and zombies and these very strict things that you've seen over and over and over again. So when you come at something that's both familiar but different, which the Aswang is, for certainly my point of view, it draws you in because it is human-like in a way, it's female in a way, but it's also not. And you have the wings and you have the tongue thing, and it's just, these are things that don't come up a whole lot in Western sort of monsters. And so to be presented with that, it's like it's something that's new and different, which is always a nice thing.
Yeah, it's kind of unique in that way. Also, if you're a Filipino, you usually think of the Aswang as kind of ridiculous because it's basically a woman who shears off half of her body and flies with basically bat wings. So in movies and TV shows before, when I was growing up, it was frightening, but at the same time, it was kind of laughable.
Right.
So I had to think of a visual in which to show that it fitted this world. It has this gruesome appearance, but at the same time, it's beautiful. It has this this beauty around it that if you see it, you don't know whether to run from it or what. It has this supernatural beauty to it. That's what I'm trying to imply.
Right. And I think you captured that. But also what tends to happen, and I found, is things can work in drawings and comics that don't always work in movies. Like movies become too literal that, what's the special effect, what's not, what's CGI, what's schlocky, add on, plastic. But in a comic, it's all real and it all feels real and it feels as tangible as anything else in this world. So, the Aswang is just as tangible as Ren is. And so there's more of a suspension of disbelief, I think, because it has that same weight. It still feels just as real. Well, so that's one of the reasons I love comics and I love, traditionally drawn animation, because that's the power that a drawing brings to it, is it gives it a reality that a real life movie maybe doesn't.
Yeah, definitely.
So okay, so the other part of the thing on the cover that's interesting and that you alluded to is that this is going to be a story mainly about Simon and Ren, two characters who don't aren't together a whole heck of a lot. So
Yeah.
Ren can't stand Simon. She didn't particularly like Simon before he tried to kidnap and do whatever with her, and especially didn't afterwards. So whereas Simon is kind of oblivious to all of the social life of high school and probably doesn't think a whole lot about Ren anyway, other
Hmm.
than she hangs out with them, so she must be his friend. Um,
Hmm.
so we talked about when we were going to send Ren to the Philippines that we needed to send somebody with her, if nothing else, to give her somebody to talk to. And
Hmm.
we've seen her with Anton so much. We've seen her with Matt an awful lot. We've seen her with even Sarah to some extent and Alex to some extent. But the person that we hardly ever see her with is Simon. And, coming from my standpoint as a writer, like if you can throw characters together who aren't normally together, that's going to make something more interesting than if you're just doing the same thing that you'll always do.
Yeah, definitely sparks fly, especially
Yeah.
with these two
Yeah,
who
especially these
are
two.
polar opposites in a way.
Right. Exactly. So thought that would be fun. So that was the plan. We're gonna send them there. We have
I see a
established.
cat.
Yeah, here's my cat. Yeah. Say hi.
Hello, cat.
So we were gonna send them there. We knew that we were leaving the rest of them in Miskatonic. We knew that Ren's mother had disappeared.
Yeah.
We knew that she was being stalked by the Aswang because we'd seen it in the crystal ball, and we knew that Ren's aunt had gone missing. Um, and so that's where we were going to pick up. And so why don't we go ahead and jump into the issue and start taking a look and seeing what we got.
All right.
Um, we have Anton doing the previously. Just thought that he'd be a fun one to do it. He
Mhm.
he's always got something interesting to say. He's kind of ticked off that he doesn't appear more in this issue, which seems like an Anton sort of thing. I can't tell you the number of people who were upset that Anton wasn't there dealing with the Aswang because they felt like so many jokes were capable of Simon taking on an Aswang.
Mhm.
So he's talking about that. He fills us in and all the stuff, and then we get this prologue. So we came to this a little bit later. We knew that this was going to be the start of season 3, and there's certain things that we wanted to deal with in season 3. And as we've written more scripts and drawn more of the issues, we have a better idea of where we're going with season 3, and really wanted to sort of touch on certain things and sort of set up certain things. And so
Mhm.
we have Mr. Waleed in the basement of Miskatonic High, opening a crate that we had seen back in issue 6 that was addressed to Herbert West at Miskatonic University, and letting this thing out that runs out into the stormy night. Again, one of the things that always strikes me is I love it when you do these pages because there's so many little Easter eggs that you can find in them. You know, all the little creatures and statues and everything that's going on back there. It's so cool to see. And
Mhm.
a lot of times I just write, it's the basement, draw some Easter eggs and move on. And so
Yeah.
this is really all you. How did you decide what to include here?
Well, just like you said, this one came from issue 6, so
Mhm.
my job here was kind of easier because I just had to refer to that. I didn't have
Mhm.
to look to Google for reference,
Uh-huh.
only to point back at my drawings. So yeah, this one I decided to change the angle or
Mhm.
the viewing angle. I
Mhm.
decided to make it from looking from above,
Mhm.
just so it has a different perspective.
Mhm.
Since this is Walid, I
Mhm.
wanted to show his room as well, which was only hinted in
Mhm.
issue 6.
Yep.
Um, And then I just moved around a few things. Of course, some of the stuff from issue 6 doesn't appear here, but anyway, the important thing was the crate,
Right.
and how and what the contents of it was. So that
Right.
was mainly the important thing about this page.
Right. Exactly. I do love that angle at the first one that we're looking down at him. I love the little rat in the foreground and crawling across the pipe.
Yeah,
I love all
I
of
decided on that early on.
that. You can never go wrong with a little rat. So he opens this crate, he releases the thing, runs out. I love the color palette here. You know, the pinks, the purples. You know, it's a number of people over, I guess, the years now have mentioned to me that your color palette is really cool, that it's very different from what they're used to seeing. You know, in horror comics, you're used to it being very dark or maybe very sharp contrast or a lot of reds, but you have a very cool palette which brings out these sort of pinks and purples and blues, which I really like. You know, it looks different, and it has a unique flavor to it that whenever I see it, I'm like, yep, that's Ryan's colors right there.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, it did really start out that way. As you know, the first few issues wasn't really like this. I was still trying to experiment. I think it solidified somewhere around issue 6, funny enough.
Yeah. Right. I remember that. It went through, you know, it started very saturated, very bright and vivid, especially that first issue with all the fall colors. I remember that. You know, and then it slowly moved to this more cool color, which, you know, I really like it. So I think what happened was, you know, certainly from the way I recall, is the pinks of, you know, Ren's hair and the blues of Anton sort of became permeated throughout this whole series, and just, you know, that color contrast just works so well for us, and we've just sort of run with it ever since. Yeah. All right. So after the prologue, we jump into a second prologue. As I said, the first prologue sort of came to us later, and we wanted to do the prologue for the Aswang story, which we see from the perspective of Mina, Ren's mother, from back when she was in the village, and her father was the medicine man there, which Abul-Yaro, how do you pronounce that?
Albulario.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you do that because I'm not gonna be able to do that. And that he protected the village, and that one of the things that he always tells Ren is whenever she's scared, what she should always do is look towards the light. And, you know, in that last panel, we see the sun coming up over what we will later find out is the volcano, and the cloud above it. And we'll find out later the reason why he's always telling her to look towards the light. Trying to think. One of the things that we'll talk about as we get into this, because we spend a lot of time in this village, is how tangible it is. It feels like a real lived-in village. Like when I look at it, it feels like you either have spent time there or you got some really good reference images, because it feels really tangible, like this is a real place.
Yeah, I have been to lots of places like this before, but I still needed to use a reference just to make sure I had things right. And, you know, ideas flow better when you have additional references. I mean, I have already ideas of what the houses would look like, but actually not many places in the rural areas look like this. They have more modern houses now, but there are still places that have these types of houses, especially in the more remote areas.
Yeah.
So it was still quite applicable for this place. And I mean, you did want it to be a remote place. So I wanted it to have that tangible, like you said, a tangible feeling of being lived in, and it's been here for a very long time, and not much has changed since I don't know, maybe the 50s.
Right. Right. And that makes a lot of sense. For the story that we were telling, we really wanted the village life to be important, but also to be very remote and separate. Like once you're in this village, you're sort of trapped here and you're surrounded by the jungle and what's going on in the jungle. And so, like any good horror story, you want to put people in a place that sort of traps them.
Right.
It heightens the tension. And so I think that works for us here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so we get that, and then we jump to LaGuardia Airport in New York, getting on the airplane, and Ren is going to have to sit next to Simon, and she hates it. There's no way she's going to sit next to this guy. Um, Simon is happy to see her. He can't wait for her to sit down, and they can start talking about their flight together. He's on his way to India. We set up at the end of season 2 in the last issue 13, that his grandfather has a link to the Necronomicon, and that he wants to go and find out about it because of his connection to it, which is that he's going to age backwards and be Alhazred, who writes the Necronomicon. So that's why he's going there, and she happens to be on the same flight. He's going to lay over in the Philippines and then head on to Mumbai, but she's not thrilled. But it's a sold out flight, and the airline stewardess tells her, "Yeah, sorry, you got to sit next to him." And
Yeah.
yeah, you really don't need more than that. Just throw them together, and the sparks are going to fly.
Yeah, but I really like this page and how it sets up their little adventure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's always nice to draw something different from what we usually do. I mean,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah,
all seen the school scenes
Mhm.
and the creepy villages and stuff, but it's very rare that we venture out into the more mundane world.
Right. Right. And a good horror story, I always think, starts in the very mundane. It starts in this place where that's very, familiar and non-threatening, and then you do this thing, and it slowly gets you deeper and deeper into the unfamiliar and the more sinister. So they're on this flight and they take off, and the guy sitting next to Simon, is asking them to please leave him out of this. Meanwhile, back in Miskatonic, Sarah is doing the voiceover for us, the captions, and telling us what's going on since issue 13. So we're moving towards Christmas time. We've sort of slowly been moving through the fall to the Christmas, or fall to the winter season, from issue 1 to now. We've been sort of setting it up with the leaves falling, snow getting ready to start falling. It's getting darker, it's getting colder. It's I come from New England, and that's exactly what it's like. And I know you don't, but you capture it pretty well. So Sarah, Matt, Alex are in class together. Alex is asleep because she's been busy studying with Kerwin at night, and so she can barely stay awake.
Yeah.
Matt is struggling with math, which seems appropriate for a guy who works at the bank.
I would be Alex sleeping right now if it's algebra.
Yeah, well, my son is going through algebra right now, and so I have to help him with his homework, and it's all coming back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Anton is appearing as Ren while she's away and making out with Trish in the hallways, I think just to piss off Matt, but I'm not entirely sure. And Trish is going along with it, and we get the situation where Sarah helps Matt answer a question, and he invites her to hang out with him afterwards at the hockey practice.
Yeah.
That's what we get from Miskatonic, and then we're back on the airplane. this scene I think was gonna be longer, but then had to trim it once we realized the rest of the issue was going long. Where Simon is doing work on the plane that isn't classwork. He's doing some reading about mythology, beliefs, and talking about the connection between Hindu mythology and Filipino mythology. Which there are some connections there. One of the things that I had found was that the people from India a long time ago had been traders and travelers and had ventured into the Philippines area and had sort of left some of their culture there as well, which the Filipinos picked up on and sort of continue on with. And then immediately the plane starts jolting. There's turbulence. One of Simon's books whacks the guy next to him in the nose. He's bleeding, and Simon goes to help him, and looking out the window doesn't even get the napkin over his nose. And we see in the next one that they are over a volcano in the Philippines, and there's a face in the cloud, and we get our title, The Gift of the Dewater. Why don't we talk about this? One of the things that I try to do in the script is give you a big sort of opening image, a splash page as much as I can, to sort of introduce the big ideas of this thing. And so sort of threw this one at you that, there's a volcano, it's going through the engine, and there's something going on in the smoke and the ash out there. So why don't you talk about how you approach this image?
Yeah, I was a bit worried about this image because, well, not just the image, but the whole scenes that followed. I mean, I've never drawn a plane crash before, so I was a bit nervous about that, but I think I was able to pull it off.
I do too.
Anyway,
I think the plane crash is great.
Anyway, we're very familiar with volcanoes erupting. Just before the pandemic, we had a very big scare from one of our volcanoes here, which was Taal volcano, and I guess that was permeating with our discussion when we were discussing this issue, and so I think we kind of decided to put this in, and also it was kind of convenient. And we already talked about why we decided the plane crash, just to set up the story.
Right.
So in this one, I remember that the volcano erupting was just a simple volcano smoke and ashes. And then we both figured that there was something missing. It wasn't supernatural or scary enough. And that was when I thought of the Mummy, the movie The Mummy, wherein
the face in the sand cloud.
The sandstorm was approaching, and then his face was starting to form around it. And I thought this was a great way to kind of mimic that.
Well, and like we talked about before, here it feels more tangible. Like the thing I remember from The Mummy is how bad the CGI was, and so the sandstorm face was an interesting idea that didn't quite work for me because it was too CGI. Whereas here, it works because it's all part of the same grounded reality that everything else is drawn in. So
yeah, it's funny that we view movies that was shown a few decades ago as something akin to Harryhausen movies now. I mean, back then we were seeing dinosaurs walking and spaceships blowing up buildings, and we thought, wow, this is the best ever, and nothing can top this. And then movies right now, even TV shows right now, are
Right.
even better in quality.
Right. And one of the things is always when I see a movie now that uses like practical effects, like where they actually do like a car crash or a building blows up or something. Now, like that's more awe-inspiring because like, whoa, they actually blew up a building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
George Lucas and Spielberg knew what they were doing
Yeah.
back then,
Yeah.
and green screen ruined it all.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, we one of the things that we talked about when we were planning this was for the volcano was uh I had recalled that there was that volcano in Iceland that had launched up the ash cloud, which basically prevented airplanes from taking off from Europe for I can't remember several weeks or whatever it was. And
Yeah.
the volcano ended up proving useful for a number of reasons for us. But one of the reasons was if there's this ash cloud above, there's no planes going to be taking off, and Simon's going to be stuck there for a while
Mhm.
with Ren, which is really what we wanted to keep them together. The other cool thing is because there's this ash cloud above, it's basically going to be dark all the time, which is going to create this really weird effect, to being there, that everything is going to be dark and nighttime and sort of slightly more scary just by the nature of that. So it worked for us for so many reasons. So once we sort of stuck with it, we did. The plane crash,
We
to
have
be
a
honest, I'm not
timer.
even sure why we did the plane crash. I think that was my idea for some reason. But it worked. It was a bit of action to sort of kick us off to, there's danger, that there's something, like you said, adding that supernatural element, that something is sort of attacking them, sort of more powerful than them, and dragging them down to earth, and putting them through this, I think works. So plus I like the joke where um Ren, Simon says that I think there's a volcano down there, and Ren says, I think you're an idiot. And he's like, no, really, there's a volcano down there. And she's like, oh yeah, I know there's a volcano, but you're still an idiot. So that to me right there is their relationship, which is Simon is
Yeah.
right, but Ren still think he's an idiot. Um, so they get the plane crashes, but they manage to survive. They get off. They are waiting for their luggage. Um, this was problematic. I remember we talked about this, that if you're in a plane crash, they're probably not going to let you take your luggage and just leave.
Yeah,
Um,
that was my concern.
yeah, but we were telling a story. We have 28 pages. We didn't have a whole lot of time for them to talk to airport security.
It
So
was it happened between pages.
right, exactly. They did some therapy. They dealt with their issues. They got their insurance money, and they're moving on. And so then shows up Dom, who is Ren's cousin from the village. And, she's like, no autographs, please. And he's like, I'm not after your autograph. I'm your cousin. Dom offers to take Ren and Simon to the village. And as they leave, we see the darkened sky, and they're asking him about it, and he's telling them about what's going on, that the volcano wind the ash and not letting airplanes get out,
Mhm.
and all of that.
Well, talking about airplanes and the what would have happened if volcano really erupted, I did put a little Easter egg here,
Hmm.
where when they were getting their luggage, there's
Hmm.
this where Simon was queuing up. There's this
Hmm.
the palpak.
Hmm.
If you read that, it's a play on the word palpak, which means misfortune or something not going according to plan.
Mm.
And that's because I joined the words. We like to make fun of the airlines here, so
Sure.
it's okay. So PAL is Philippine Airlines, and PAC is added to Cebu PAC, which is Cebu Pacific. So I
Mhm.
joined them together to make it PAL PAC,
Papa.
which means it doesn't go according to plan most of the time.
which is the case for this story as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
Just a little Easter egg there.
that's awesome. I love that. So let's see. So they go out, they get in the van and they're driving, and we find out that Dom really isn't all that happy that Ren's here. That
Hmm.
he feels like he can help out the village. He doesn't need an outsider's help. She's this girl, she's been on YouTube. Everybody kind of likes her. She's from America. She's not really Filipino. All of these things, and just not really happy for her to be there. Meanwhile, Ren can't find any clothes, so she's pilfering Simon's clothes. Going through all of her clothes have been burnt in the volcano attack on the airplane. And off they go on this drive to the village. Let me ask you this, because I can't imagine it's easy. How do you draw the inside of a vehicle and yet give them enough space to be able to talk?
I'm not really that sure, but I try to make it work somehow. Well, I think it's just that I've drawn it a lot of times already, so you kind of gauge the space.
Right.
You imagine it in your head. I'm not really sure. I guess it's the same, but how can you fit dialogue? I mean, imagine in X-Men during the Claremont era.
Oh God, yeah.
How can you talk that long when Wolverine is punching Magneto or something? And I can imagine that would have taken 15 minutes for him to say it. And
right. Yeah, suspension of disbelief. Yeah, that's the joy of comics. Yeah. So off they drive, and then we get our second cutaway back to Miskatonic, which is hockey practice. We have established that Matt plays hockey. We have established that Barry used to play hockey, and he got killed back in issue 8. Another player apparently got mono and can't show up to practice, and so they're having a situation where they're not going to have enough players. They're going to have to forfeit the season. And who happens to be there but Sarah? So Matt gets the idea. Sarah, come to hockey practice. One of the things that we had talked about also was throwing Matt and Sarah together, especially while Ren is gone. When Ren is there, she sort of dominates Matt and that relationship. It's hard to look at anyone else when you have Ren around. And so sort of, throw them together, trying to be just friends, and why not play some hockey? I love the idea that, we have an artist from the Philippines drawing hockey. But you do it really well. So you must be finding some good references, because this looks really good. So we have this sort of hockey scrimmage of her and Matt on one side playing against Chris and Jeff, I think, on the other side. Yep. And Chris and Jeff are going to pound Sarah and take the puck and go down and score. But she's surprisingly good. She's good on the skates. She's probably played a little bit, and she manages to evade them, pass the puck to Matt, who scores. And in doing so, she earns the trust of the other guys, and the coach is like, yeah, you want to be on the hockey, just sign this release form. And so she decides, okay, I'm going to join the hockey team.
Yeah, I think we discussed before that Sarah is kind of good with sports. In issue 3, funny enough, again,
that's the one we saw her.
We saw her playing soccer, and I think that was when we came up with the idea that Sarah is this rat thing which is probably pretty agile and
Yep.
also has very good senses. And I think that would translate well with sports. It's
Yeah.
one of her unknown skills.
Right. And I remember having that conversation and remember thinking, yeah, that was a good idea. Is, you with one hand you take away, but with the other hand you give something back. And so she's turning into this rat thing, but at the same time, she's good at sports. The other thing that sort of occurred to me was that, if she spends, all this time out on the orchard, probably by herself growing up, she probably, didn't have a whole ton of friends. She would probably spend a great deal of time outdoors there, and ponds freeze over, people go ice skating all the time, that she'd probably be pretty good
you
at
mentioned
it.
that.
Yeah. So that was sort of our thinking with that. And we wanted to throw, again, Matt and Sarah together, and sort of a kind of a lot this season, and tying it in with hockey, with her being on the hockey team, sort of opens up a new path that we wanted to explore. We talk a lot about wanting to explore the school and some of the different aspects of school, maybe eventually doing like a school play, or we've shown like the school newspaper. Here's a chance where we get to dig into the sports aspect of it. Like, here's a sports team, here's what it's like, and sort of be able to see that. So I like this. I like that, this part of it, and I think it's an interesting mix with Ren and Simon in the jungle, and here they are on a hockey rink.
It's a good segue.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a good way to glimpse at the various activities back at school, just to break the tension from what was going on in the main story.
Right. And we've had success with that. So, it relieves some of the tension, and, so like you said, it shows what's going on and all of that. Okay. So then we are back at the village. They arrive, and we get to meet Natalia, who is Dom's wife, who's quite pregnant. And they are staying at Ren's grandfather's house, which she has seen in the village, in the visions back from issue 3 again. Hey, keeps coming up. So Dom tells Ren and Simon, don't leave the house. No matter what, don't leave the house. So of course, like any good horror story, when somebody tells you not to do something, that's exactly what the people end up doing.
They never listen.
They never listen. So they go in and they explore a little. Simon is interested in it and talking, whereas Ren is seeing visions of the lost souls that she can see. And the one particularly one that she keeps seeing is her grandfather, who we know is dead because he got killed by the Aswang, which we saw in issue 3. Meanwhile, Simon is checking out the books to find out more information, because that's what Simon is good for. He's good for, doing the intellectual
research.
Study.
Research.
And to be able to then tell us about it later without us having to spend a whole lot of time doing it.
In a role-playing game, he would be the professor.
He would, but his ability to play a part probably wouldn't be great. Whereas Alex probably would be great at it. Actually, Ren would probably be great at it too. She probably loves playing characters. So Ren, meanwhile, is overhearing what Natalia and Dom are talking about, which is, that Dom is kind of angry. He really feels like he can take care of things himself, and she's trying to get him to talk to Ren. She feels like Ren can help out, and should let him help out. Do you want to talk? We're throwing a lot of new characters into this, with Dom, with Natalia. We're going to throw some more pretty soon. Do you want to talk about how you approach creating those characters?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted Dom to looks kind of similar to Ren's mom somehow, but of course, it also had to look like his dad, which we'll find out later that is the brother of Ren's mom. which we have very interesting names for them, by the way. We should refer to them that with their names later on.
Yeah, we definitely should.
Anyway, I wanted them to look as Filipino as possible, although you can't really define that because the Philippines is really diverse with lots of heritage from other countries here in Asia. I mean, particularly here in Southeast Asia, we have Malay blood, we have Indonesian blood, we probably have Japanese and Chinese blood as well, and it's a mixture of culture and races. And but there is characteristics like the darker skin and less pronounced noses, and so I try to draw them that way. But there wasn't really anything particularly special with them. I didn't want to make them stand out too much because I understand that they are side characters. But I did want to make Dom a bit more outlandish. I mean, you don't actually see many Filipinos dressed the way that he does, but since he's a albulario in training, I did want to make him look a bit the part, a bit cool. I mean, he's more of a modern day looking albulario, and so I wanted him to have the longer hair and the bandana, which is usually connected to the witch doctors, but I wanted it to make it look more like a Sons of Anarchy look to him.
Right. Well, and on this page you can even see it. You know, you have the ghost of the grandfather who has, you know, the head covering, and then you have Dom who also has it. So there is that connection. You can see that he's trying to sort of follow in the family footsteps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ren and Natalia sit down, they have a snack, and Natalia finally fills us in on what's going on. That you know, the Aswang has sort of been terrorizing the village, that Dom's father, Ren's uncle, Mina's brother, has become the Aboyaro for the village, and it's been trying to hold him off, but still the Aswang keep coming and took his wife, took Dom's mother, and then Mina came back to the village to try and find her, and then she went missing as well.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about, you know, especially as this issue goes on, it really gets plot heavy, that there's a lot of backstory that we're sort of filling people in on. And I think I worried about that, and you probably worried less about that, and I appreciate that you did. Which is, that's sort of how we tell our stories, that, you know, we tend to put an awful lot into these stories. We like a lot of plot. I know you like noir, I like noir, I like, you know, a good mystery with a whole lot of plot and sort of misdirection and stuff like that. So, you know, I think there's something to that, and we reward readers who pay attention to like all the little details.
Yeah, and also people who read back and analyze it a bit more after reading the whole issue. I mean, I know a few readers who love to do that. And it's just like in movies or TV shows, you don't catch everything in one go. And like you said, we like different genres of stories. I mean, a little bit of everything is usually what makes a good story come to life. It's just not one thing. I mean, you can do a kick-ass, hard-boiled noir story if you really wanted to, but for other kind of stories, you can inject mystery, you can inject romance. All these things can come hand in hand with different types of stories.
Exactly. Right. And like you said, one of the things that I think our series does really well is it rewards people who go back and read it again. They pick up on things that they probably didn't pick up on the first time. That you can start to
Mhm.
see that we're sort of laying the seeds for a lot of things that are going to happen. And I like books like that. Those are the books that I love, are the ones that you can reread and find new things each time
Yeah,
you read.
and not just in each issue, but also after finishing a season, we
Hmm.
tend to drop a few more hints
Hmm.
by the end of the series.
Hmm.
I mean, of the season,
Hmm.
and then what we thought was happening last season is actually just a tip of the iceberg,
Hmm.
and then there's this whole thing going on here
Hmm.
that changes what you were thinking about it
Hmm.
entirely,
Right.
and those sort of things, right? I mean, this guy starts off as being a asshole, and then he ends up being this nice guy after all,
Hmm.
because we didn't know what was going on with his life back
Right.
then.
Right.
And that's what I
Exactly.
really love about this.
Right. And I like, we've talked about this before about our characters that, they're sort of typical teenagers, which is sometimes they're good, sometimes they're annoying, sometimes they're funny, sometimes, they're
Just not
sarcastic.
teenagers, but humanity as a
Yeah,
whole.
that's
I
true.
mean, nobody is a perfect saint, and nobody is a devil
Right.
as well. There's
Right.
always there's always this central divide that we tend to go back and forth to, depending on the situation and how you present yourself at that time.
Right. And that sort of comes into play a lot here, both with Ren and Simon, that you think they're going to be a certain way because of what we've seen them do before. But they don't necessarily act that way throughout this whole story, that, they act in different ways. Maybe they're growing some, maybe they're, just tired or whatever, but, so anyway, I think it works for us. I think, um, it works well in this story, especially because we gave the space to do it, because we did do it over 2 issues. It really allowed
Mhm.
us, to sort of explore that a little bit more.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, Natalia asks Ren, is my mother-in-law dead? Is Dom's mother dead? Because I really want her
Mhm.
here for, for when I give birth, she's important to me. Is there, you have these powers. Is there some way that you can tell me if she's dead or not? And Ren is like, well, we're really not supposed to go outside. And Natalia's like, we'll hurry, it'll be fine. And Ren's like, okay, fine. But we have to go to some place that she spent a lot of her life, because that's how she sees people, where they lived, if they're
Yeah,
dead.
it's just there somewhere in the dark beyond
Yeah,
the trees.
right. Let's just go outside into the jungle. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah,
Um,
nobody's around, just the barking dog.
yeah, it's funny how everybody in the village disappeared. Um, so they
No,
go.
no, no. Seriously, in the rural areas,
Uh-huh.
by 7 or 8 o'clock, they're all asleep.
Oh, really?
There's
Yeah,
nothing to do,
yeah.
and they have to get up early in the morning. So it's not strange for these things to happen.
Right. Yeah. Very sort of rural lifestyle. I mean, we have that here with farmers and things like that, where,
Mhm.
people, you go based upon the sun. When the sun goes down, that's when their day is done.
Yep.
Um, so they find out that no, they don't, that Ren can't see her spirit, her lost soul. So clearly she's not dead, which makes Natalia happy. Um, Meanwhile, Simon hears a noise outside the door and goes outside, again, leaving the house after he's told not to, and finds a little baby. And Simon, being the nice, guy that he is, always trying to do the good thing, picks up the baby, and the baby turns out, um, you shouldn't pick it up, bites Simon in the neck, um,
Mhm.
and Dom has to come and sort of whack it with a book, to get it off. And um, because Dom is the Aboyero, has the knowledge of what it is, that it's a Tianak.
Jan.
Tianak. Okay. And that the way to get rid of it, one of the ways to get rid of it is to give it a name. And so Simon names it Jerk, and it turns into a blackbird and flies away. But as terrible as that is, Dom realizes, wait, where is Natalia? Where is Ren? And here's the tick tick sound of the Aswang. And that's when we see that the Aswang has gotten its sights on Natalia and is trying to eat the fetus inside of her. Which is, it's, again, that's not something that happens a whole lot in Western, monster mythology.
Asian mythology is creepy as heck.
Yeah, but that's why people love it.
Have you seen Japanese mythology and the floating heads?
Yeah.
Severed heads?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do these people think about these things?
But that's what's so great about it,
Yeah.
So it's attacking Natalia. Ren is trying to hit it with a shovel and doing no good. Simon's there getting kicked in the head, and Dom seems to be running away. And Ren's like, of course he would run away. But he's going to get something, and he's going to get the bamboo knife. According to mythology, if you stab an Aswang in the square center of the back, you can kill an Aswang. But he misses, and it splits apart and pulls Ren and Natalia up to the roof, flying with its bat's wings. And the lower half starts attacking Simon, because why not?
Yeah.
One of the things that I read, when we started talking about doing this issue, I was kind of nervous about it because I didn't know a lot about it. And so did a lot of research, just reading up on it, because to be perfectly honest, it's fascinating to find out about this stuff and to hear about it, again, from a Western perspective. But the idea that this thing is capable of ripping itself in half, where half of it turns in and flies and this other half is on the ground. One of the things that I found out is that if you kill the legs, you can take out it damages the top because it can't reconnect, and so eventually it dies. I never read anything about it being able to attack as legs acting independently, but the idea of independent legs attacking Simon was so funny. I just thought that would be a fun thing to see, and to be perfectly honest, it is.
Well, like we discussed before, mythology is a very complicated thing. People have their own ideas about it, and some people hold some aspects of it very close to their ideals. And I knew you were worried about it, and so I decided that we can't really please everyone with our interpretation of the creatures of the mythology. So I just decided that let's just make our own version of it, and just be sure to be as close as possible. I mean, most Filipinos are aware of the Aswang and the Tiyanak based on the shows they've watched when they were growing up. There are stories told to them by their grandparents or their titos and titas, which are basically aunties and aunties. And they're very different from place to place. If you're living in the northern parts compared to when you're living in the southern parts, it's very different. So there's not one sure or canon. If we're talking about pop culture, there's no canon to it. Although maybe the scholars will probably disagree, but I mean, there's so much you can interpret with it, as long as the spirit of it is there, as long
Right.
as we're not, making spider legs out of the of the aswang instead of
Ah,
bat wings. I mean, sure. I mean, like you said, usually in movies, the lower half is just standing there,
mhm,
and even in movies, they still wear their clothes.
mhm.
I mean, it's not that scary if you see a half body walking around
Yeah.
the forest or the jungle. I mean, so making it attack seems like a more logical thing. And also, I thought, what happens with the insides?
Right.
Do they just flop down like that and spurt blood, or maybe make it more dynamic and it
Mhm.
goes squiggly around like tentacles, which would make it more visually interesting.
Right.
I
And
mean,
also
even
bring back
even
the
the tongue of
Lovecraftian element.
the yeah,
Yeah.
even the tongue of the aswang is very Lovecraftian
Mhm.
in its appearance, that it's more tentacly in
Right.
its appearance. And for the Chanak, I mean, there's so many interpretation on what it looks like. It looks like a dead baby. It looks
Mhm.
like a ghoul. And
Mhm.
I thought Chanaks are usually unborn babies,
Mhm.
so they're not fully formed. So I
Right.
decided not to put skin on it.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a fetus that grew up the wrong way,
Mhm.
and maybe I was watching too much Attack on Titan or something like that.
Well, it's got the little horn, so somebody's like, it looks kind of like a baby Darth Maul. So yeah, there's all kinds of references going on in there.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you told me was, consider like vampire mythology from like a Western standpoint. There are certain rules to it, but there's so many different interpretations of how it plays out.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
if you read on the Scandinavian version of the vampire, or the
Mhm,
I can't recall what they're actually called in the Scandinavian tales, but it's
mhm,
very different from what Bram Stoker
right,
used in Dracula.
right,
Although his version is much closer than what we're used to in modern day
right.
vampires. I mean, for sure they don't glisten in the sun. Come on.
What? Not a fan of Twilight? Come on. Um, so yeah, it- again, yeah. So I remember being very concerned about it because I didn't want to tick anybody off. But usually when I get in those situations, I talk to you, and you sort of usually set me on the right path, which is don't worry too much about it. We'll stick to the very basic structure of it. That we won't insult it, we won't do that, but we'll make it our own. And by making it our own and bringing it into this world, it'll work. And I think you were right about that, and I think it really worked for us. So meanwhile, up on the roof, the Aswang is again trying to eat the fetus. um Ren pulls out her amulet that her mother gave her again back in issue 3, which is
Mhm.
glowing. The idea that it is a power, that it is magic, that it does have a certain power, and that the Aswang doesn't like it. Um, she manages to get the Aswang off of Natalia and fall back down, where it reconnects and flies off. Um, Dom can't give Ren any credit for having managed to do this. He's like, oh yeah, it's probably grandfather's amulet. You probably were holding it wrong. Um, they help Natalia down. He slams the door in her face, and she goes to lie down. She can't sleep. The thing that I was thinking was, a they're probably so jet lagged they have no idea what time it is. And then B, with it always being dark, you've heard stories of like insomnia or people in the Arctic Circle where that mess up of your circadian rhythm really just does a number on you, where you have no idea what time it is, or your sleep is so messed up. And so
Yeah,
sort of.
I heard of travelers who go to Manila and then
Mhm.
they suffer extreme jet lag. And then just when they're getting used to Manila time, they're
Mhm.
already back in the States.
Right, and then it's all thrown out. Yeah, I have a neighbor who's from the Philippines, and she was telling me that she had to travel like 29 hours to get home, and then by the time she got used to it, she had to come back. Um, so yeah, I think that's very much true. So as long as she can't sleep, she's wearing Simon's clothes, and she bumps into Simon, who's reading the book, who very nicely gives us the information about what he's been reading, which is uh, that the idea that there has been this conflict between the dark and the light side, between the Aswang and the Dewater, which is sort of a spirit of nature, um, and that at some point the Encanto came along, which is not the Disney movie, and created a balance that sort of stopped the conflict and allowed things to proceed from there. Um, Neither one of them really knows what the Encanto are. Um, Simon's still doing the reading, and sort of talks to us about some of the different creatures that are in the mythology. The Caparosa, the woman in white who's in the pool, who we again saw in issue 3. The Aswang, the some of the others. Simon is trying to figure out what it is that's going on here, that is this sort of light and this dark. And what he links it back to is kind of the Hindu belief of a creation myth, the dark and the light, um, creation, destruction. It's a very Hindu sort of idea that these things are merged together. It's actually in a lot of mythologies, but
Yeah, yeah.
specifically
Just like the flood myths.
right. And so since he's sort of thinking about these things, it just sort of makes sense. And in Hindu mythology, there's the same idea of sort of the spirits of nature, of these things. And it's I can't remember what it's called in Hindi, but it's very similar to Dewato in Filipino.
Mhm.
Um, so he's talking about this. It also allows them to sort of talk about who they are. They amongst our group of characters, other than maybe Anton, they come from a non-white background. Simon comes from a very Indian background. Both his parents are originally from India. Ren is half Filipino, half a white Caucasian from probably Texas or somewhere. New York, I know he's living in now. So they're sort of ethnically different than, like Sarah, whose family has probably lived in, Miskatonic for countless generations. We know Matt's family's been there for countless generations, Alex as well. So they had a chance to sort of talk about how they feel about themselves. Ren doesn't really feel like she belongs here.
Well,
She's
maybe
always
it's
sort of,
because of the proximity. I mean, we are
Mhm.
in Miskatonic, and most of the history in there is deals with their families.
Right.
From issue 2, we already saw the backgrounds of
Mhm.
Sarah and her family.
Right.
So it's very much tied with where they live.
Right.
For Ren, it's a bit tricky because she lives in two worlds.
Right.
I mean, we saw, or she was able to show us what she wanted us to see with
Mhm.
her YouTube gigs and how she wanted to present herself in
Mhm.
school. We saw
Right.
that in issue 3 as well. And now it's only now that we're seeing the other side of her. So
Right.
it's very much proximity. It's
Mhm.
very much because of the location and the
Mhm.
setting. The same goes with Simon. I mean,
Mhm.
we were able to see a glimpse of his past with
Mhm.
what issue is that? Issue 12.
12. Yeah.
Yeah, but we've never really explored it that much because it just doesn't make sense with the proximity of the place. I mean, we just can't go. We're going to tell about the story of
Right.
Simon right now out of the blue. I mean, we
Right.
can do that like we did with issue 12, but
Mhm.
it's very much limited to what we wanted them to focus on what the story was about at
Right.
that time.
Right. And part of where we're going with this is I think it's a very high school thing to do. And maybe again, it's a humanity thing to do, to think about where you fit in the world. You know, for Simon, you know, where he, he's never really fit into Miskatonic. You know, part of it is just because he's kind of a jerk about being really smart and being smarter than everybody else, you know. So he probably never really felt like he fit in, and he doesn't probably understand why. Whereas Ren purposefully tried to fit in. You know, she doesn't eat her. You talk about her living in two worlds. It's almost like she lives in three worlds. You know, one is, you know, Miskatonic. One is, you know, her mother's family from back here. But the third one is probably on the internet, on social media. That's probably the place she feels most comfortable. And it doesn't matter
Correct.
who she is there. You know, what matters is, you know, how popular she is, how creative she is, how many viewers she can get to draw into her. And I think that's probably where she feels most comfortable. So it doesn't, of course, she doesn't feel comfortable here. She's so withdrawn from, you know, that world right now.
Yeah, it's just like Batman when they say, who is the real Batman? Is it
Mhm.
Bruce Wayne or is it Batman? Is it Bruce Wayne wearing a cowl or is it Batman pretending to be a billionaire playboy?
Right. Right. And you know, the nice thing is, again, Ren and Simon haven't had a lot of conversations. So to put them together and be able to have these conversations, I like quite a bit. One of the fun things that we do here between Simon and Ren is wearing Simon's clothes. Um,
Mhm.
which completely throws him off, but it's also like really cute, like for between them, you know, that it's like this sort of ongoing joke that she's stolen his clothes and is wearing them and he can't get them back from her.
Uh-huh.
Um, anyway, can you talk about, you know, because I sort of threw that at you, you know, outfitting Red in Simon's clothes. Was that a challenge? Was it easy? How did you decide what to put her in?
Well, the most sensible thing to do was just refer back to issue 2, where
Hmm.
we see Simon wearing his casual clothes for the
Hmm.
first time.
Hmm.
I mean, we did decide early on that their casual clothes will be just like uniforms,
Hmm.
just like in Scooby Doo, where they wear it all the time. I mean, it's just a comic book kind of thing,
Hmm. Yeah.
wherein it's just consistent, make the characters, uh, more, you can recognize them more easily that way.
Right.
So
Identify them.
his inner shirt, that's what I used for Ren,
Hmm.
because he usually wears another blue polo shirt above
Hmm.
it, a
Yeah.
shirt, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just used the inner T-shirt,
Hmm.
and I thought that was very appropriate for what you were looking for.
Right.
I mean, it would have been long enough for it to look like a sleepwear or something.
Right. Yeah, I think it really works. And like I said, you know, it's there's almost something like a romantic comedy bit to it, which is, you know, like you throw these two people who are constantly fighting, but also have this real intimacy of like sharing clothing and things like that. That it just
Yeah, maybe some people will not even notice
yeah.
this, but yeah, sharp-eyed readers will probably say, "Hey, I know that shirt."
Yeah, from now on they're going to be looking for that shirt. It's be like, oh, that's the shirt that Ren wore.
Mhm.
Mhm. Um, okay, so she leaves Simon and goes and sees the ghost of her grandfather. Her grandfather is a younger man getting ready to head out into the jungle. And his wife is saying, "You're going?" And he's saying, "I must, you know. She promised to give me something we needed to stop the Aswang." which of course Ren is looking for something to stop the Aswang. So she decides, okay, you know what, I'm going to follow him. And Simon is like, what are you doing? We just had this problem of going outside. Why are you doing it again? And she's like, I got to, I have to go. And so Simon is thrown into this place where he has to make this choice of, does he follow Ren into the darkened jungle, or does he do the smart thing and just stay there? And, you know, for the first time, Simon doesn't do the smart thing and he decides to follow her.
At least he was hesitant.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like about Simon. And Simon knows better, but he can't stop. You know, he knows he shouldn't do this, but so Ren is following her grandfather out into the jungle, and stumbles across her uncle Ario, who is bleeding, is unconscious, and is by this pool of water. And so she has to make a choice. Is she going to follow her grandfather's spirit, or is she going to help Uncle Ario? She decides, okay, I'm going to help Uncle Ario. And she goes into his memories to see what's going on, to try and find out what happened. And what she sees is sort of his life story from early on. His father favored Mina, Ren's mother, to become the next Abayaro. That for some reason he favored her, whereas Ario thought it should have been him. You know, as the son, should have been him. And he's so upset about this that he goes out and he learns dark magic instead. That instead of working to help protect the village, he decides that he wants revenge. He uses that dark magic to help this woman who's been this sort of jilted lover, and that ends up being creating the curse of the guy with the worms coming out of his skin that we saw again back in issue 3. Really, one of the things that I wanted to do was tie a lot of what we had talked about in issue 3 to here. We weren't going to get a whole lot of chances to really fill in that backstory, and so really wanted to take advantage of it.
How many issues was that? I think most readers are not used to this kind of storytelling, but back in the day, this was the norm.
Right.
I mean, I remember reading X-Men and Sandman, and then I'd read just bits of story in this issue, and then it would come back like 50 issues later, and then whoa, it would just blow my mind. I mean, I thought that was the normal thing to do with storytelling.
Right.
And then I heard feedback about why is there no continuation of the story from issue 3. I mean,
right.
I waited 50 issues for that, man. You only had to wait. You only had to wait 7 for this one.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, and sort of that's what we do. We don't really write for a trade where it's like, here's a big chunk of story, you know, that's in this. We really are sort of weaving different stories together. So, you know, Ren has her story, and Sarah has her story, and Alex has her story, you know, and Simon has his story, and Matt has his story, and Anton has his story. And, you know, it's like a symphony or like a score of really good music where a song will come in and then it'll go out, and then, you know, the song that you've heard before will come back in, and, you know, hopefully it's all working together to sort of present this big world, which is really what we were going for.
And also because maybe some people are confused why we use seasons for our series. And that's because it all comes back to TV shows back then, wherein it was not really serialized.
Right.
I mean, it's not what happens in episode 3 gets resolved in episode 4 or 5. Just like in X-Files, you don't even see a resolution until many seasons later.
Right. Right. And, you know, that's the kind of storytelling I think both you and I like. And I think it's the books that we like is where a story can do that, whereas can reference something that happened 10, 15, 20 issues ago, and you pick up on it and you're like, oh yeah. And the benefit of what we're doing is, it's the two of us, or the creators, are sort of going forward and telling this, so we really have a good feeling of who the characters are and their stories, and so we can trust that we're going to be able to go back and tell this, to tell Ren's story. What was it? It's like 10, 15 issues later, but we knew that we were eventually going to come back to it. And, hopefully the readers have faith and enough recognition that we will come back to it, because we do.
It's not like we abandon it entirely. I mean, we still show snippets here and there.
Right.
It's just that a lot of other things are going on, just like in life, or maybe in real detective stories, wherein maybe we're used to CSI solving the mystery in just one episode.
Right.
Wherein a real detective story would take years and years,
right,
even decades or generations.
Right, you get a clue here, you get a reference there, but it takes a while, and then when things start falling, maybe they start falling together really quickly. So yeah, no, I think you're right about that. So a bit more about Ario's story. Ario's dad figures out what's going on and tells him he has to get out of the house, he has to leave the village. And so Ario goes and he gets all these forces of darkness, the Aswang, the Caparosa, the Capre, all of them together, and he's summoning them, and he's sending the Aswang to go kill his father, which is what we saw in issue 3, where the Aswang kills Ren's grandfather. Ario then comes back to the village and says, look, it's a terrible situation. I will help out the village. I will save the village. I will be the new Aboyaro. I will do it. And the village embraces him, so grateful that he will. Ren's mother, Mina, has run away to America at this point, as we saw in issue 3. And he takes on the village. Then we find out that he was the one who kidnapped his wife and dragged her out into the jungle so that Mina would come back. He really wants Mina to come back. He needs her to come back. And he's finally going to take her out. And he kidnaps her. But something happened. Somebody confronted him. Somebody stabbed him, and he's bleeding out. And Ren knows that he's bleeding out in real time, and he's going to die very, very soon. And she should get out of there. She should get out of the memories, but she needs to know who did it, like who stabbed Ario. And so she needs Ario to turn and see who stabbed him, because she can't know unless he sees. And there's Dom with his bamboo knife, and he has stabbed Ario to protect the village. But as she finds that out, Ario dies, and now she is trapped in her spirit form in the Black Void. And she's trapped there, and we don't know what's going to happen. And that's where the issue ends.
It's a nice cliffhanger.
Yeah, I liked it. One of the questions that I get a lot is, or sometimes, is like, what's the nature of Ren's powers? Like, how does it work? Like, how does it work if she's in somebody and they die? Like, how does it work, to be able to see these things? And so it's kind of fun to explore that for this story, to really delve into some situations that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, her powers seem very powerful if you think about it, but it's also very dangerous. And also, she has no full control over it. I mean, there are rules on what she can see,
right,
as we've seen in previous issues. So it's not like you can just approach somebody and grab their memories or whatever.
Right.
So we laid down rules for it, and we continue to show a bit more of it, just like she's learning more of it as time goes by.
Right. And also, there's the aspect of it that these powers were sort of forced on her a little bit. We saw in issue 3 that the Caparosa, the woman in white, appeared, sort of swept over her, and after that she started seeing these lost souls, the dead spirits. And so at that time, the Caparosa said something to her, which we don't know yet, and sort of set her on this path. And so, as much as she's trapped here, these sort of powers were forced upon her, maybe for a reason, maybe not. And so that's part of her exploration, is not just what her powers are, but why does she have them? Like, were they forced on her externally? Are they part of her power as being, her bloodline from the Abollero? What exactly is the nature of it? And so, that's one of the things that I was looking forward to dealing with.
The good thing about it is we don't have to wait for 10 issues.
Right. Yeah, but you still got to wait 2 months. Sorry. Yeah. We want people to come back. So that is our issue. That is part 1. That's where we're leaving you, the cliffhanger of it. And again, I thought, looking at it when you started sending me the art with the pencils and then the inks and then with the colors, that we were really going someplace that we hadn't gone before, seeing things we hadn't seen before. And you were, I think, at one point telling me that, you drew more jungle than we had ever seen in the issue before.
Well, you always start out with, wow, I'm finally drawing something different from what I've been drawing for the last few months. And then halfway through, I'm getting sick of drawing all these trees.
Yeah.
But the reward is always seeing the final product and what the readers think about it. So it's all good in the end.
Yeah. And I think the reader's going to like this. We haven't sent it out yet, so we're getting ready to send out the digital copies to backers.
Oh,
so
yeah, right.
They're going to be getting it very soon. Hopefully they'll read it before they listen to this. Otherwise, spoilers, sorry. But yeah, so I think this came out great. I can't wait for people to read this one. I can't wait for people to read the next one and put it all together. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way this starts off this season. I like these 2-part stories sort of kick off the season, because it's a big story to sort of immerse you into this thing and then sort of drive things forward.
Yeah, we got so much more in store.
Yeah, we do.
The next few issues after this is going to be even better. If you can believe that.
Yeah, I just sent you the script for 18, I think.
I haven't read it, but I've read the first page, and I already know it's going to be a crazy story. I mean, wow, that was a great setup, man. That was a great setup. I love the way you set that up with the dance and everything. Don't want to talk too much.
Well, good. Phew. Okay, I got 1 page. I know that one's okay. But yeah, so that's how far ahead we work. We're just getting ready to send people 14, and we're working on 18 and 19.
And the good thing about it is we're still excited about talking about it and working on it, which is a good sign.
I think so. Yeah. Look, I know you've mentioned this before, and I mentioned it before, but one of the things that I really enjoy is talking with you about where we're going and about how it all works and how it all fits together. That going on this, that creating is fun, but creating with someone who's really invested into the story is a lot more fun. So I'm having a ball. I hope you're having a ball.
Yeah. As long as the ideas keep flowing, I think we can do this until what did we talk about? 100 issues?
Well, yeah, but
am I going to live that long?
sometimes I'm not so sure, but it's funny because it doesn't seem like that long ago that we were starting the whole series, and now we're already up to issue 14. I mean, a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, I I was inking. What are we now? Issue 17.
17, yeah.
And every time I ink it, I usually put my name and the issue number just to it's old traditional
Yep.
thing I do, and then it's crazy that I'm writing down issue 17. It's like, wow.
There's a lot of series that never make it this far, so I'm pretty proud of how far we made it. But yeah, we got a long way to go, and we got a lot of story to tell, and I'm really excited about some of the stories we're getting to tell.
Oh yeah,
Even
definitely.
even just this season, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, I think people are going to like it.
Yep. I think they will.
All right, why don't we end it there? Thank you for chatting with me again. This is a lot of fun.
No problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
your
Always fun.
day is ready to start. My day is ready to end. I'm going to go crash.
Hey. I know what you mean.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. See ya.
See ya.